Hello everyone and welcome to Gierok Farms. In today's video we are going to talk the numbers side of the dairy farm. We're going to talk about some of the statistics and kind of how this farm works along with how it came to be. So we're going to start off with the cattle and the dairy side of things first, up here by the old dairy barn. Dad's here to help me out with some of the numbers. Overall, we're going to be answering a lot of the common questions we get from you guys, especially you new viewers. So hope you enjoy the video. We'll be referencing other videos as we go along that go into more detail, but today we're just giving you the general layout and numbers of things here on the farm. This is my dad. He's the owner of the farm, and
mother owns half.
Yep, mom and dad own the farm. A common question: how many cows are you milking?
So the barn holds 40 tie stalls, and we're switching several. So right now we're milking 47. Typically we don't like to switch too many, but it's been awful nice winter. It's usually more of that in the summer. Total in cows with the dry ones are probably somewhere around 57. Total number of cattle is 100 and probably 18 on average. I mean, it'll vary a few either way. So we pretty much sell all the bull calves at a week old. Very rarely you'll save one here and there for butcher or something in that order. One breeding bull. We always have a breeding bull. We switch out about every other year, buy from a farm that does a lot of genetics. So you got pretty much spring and heifers to yearlings down to baby calves. Yeah, 115 to 18 head.
So that's a brief look at the cattle. And then when it comes to the milking, we get questions on how many times are we milking?
So we're milking twice a day, pretty typical for most dairies.
And then some people ask, how long does the actual milking take?
Far as here, if I'm milking myself, 6 units. If there's no fresh cows or any new heifer or something, an hour. With cleanup and everything, you're going to have a little extra time going in there. But when these boys help me, we got 8 units we can put on, and then pretty much one person preps and the other one is switching, and maybe a third guy could even be switching out those extra cows while all this is happening, so we can really trim that down.
And then the style of our milking setup, that's a common question. This would be called
it's a pipeline, and it's a one-touch. Surge One Touch is the brand name. This
would be a tie stall barn versus like a parlor or a rotary parlor or a robot setup. This would be called like a stanchion barn or a tie stall.
Stanchion or tie stall. So stanchion typically would be where their heads are actually in two rails that come together, which it actually in our situation with grazing would work great in the summer. But you've got a lever that can lock like 20 at a time on each side, where we have to physically go down through and tie each cow. Each cow has a neck strap with the number under her to keep records. And you get tamer cows doing that, because you really got to get in contact with them. You're contacting me in the front while they're eating their feed, and then you're in the back with the milking. And
then another common question is breeds of dairy cows that we have here, especially because we have a diversified herd. So what are the top 3 breeds?
So mostly Holstein. I think right now like 6 purebred brown Swiss. Milking Shorthorn, we've been crossing into our Holsteins. Jersey, we've been crossing in there. We even been starting to cross one or two into some Swiss, which makes it an interesting animal. I used to do a little bit of lineback. I never did get much results out of that. It was another breed, Normandy. And they're very pretty, and they've done very well on pasture. They're just not much of a breed to be confined, like over winter. Older cows will start to have a lot of feet trouble. They're just not a breed for that, I figured out. So
as for our breeding program, it's a mix of AI, which is what we have to do, and then we also have a bull.
About half and half. So like 6-8 months ago, our bull was quite young yet. He was not able to breed the taller, bigger cows. We more or less have a live bull more for the heifers. Otherwise, you're kind of babysitting those pens. You have to catch them in heat to actually breed them, and timing is everything. And then catching her and not having always help here every minute for that. So anyway, then occasionally we'll give a few of the dairy cows to him, and now he's getting more where he's able to handle. And it's kind of neat. Like you're not trained yet for AI, which we're going to get that done someday. But when I'm gone, we're still able to get cows bred, which is important.
And for the milking, another common question is how often does the milk truck come? How often is our milk getting delivered?
Every other day. I'm not really sure. Some of the laws are changing a little there. There's a handful of small outfits. They may go 3 days. It's not really recommended. I think it all depends on if you can keep your bacteria low and you got a good cooling system and things like that. As long as your numbers stay good. I mean, right now we've been Our somatic cell count's been in the double digits, which is actually, it's a report card.
Yeah.
And your bacteria is typically got to stay under 10. It's a number they use, and it's usually a 2 or a 3, which is it's never a 0, and that's what your state inspector will look at. So if it does go over that, they will red flag will be sent to your state inspector, and they will be inspecting you more often. Just thinking that something is not right.
So that's going to cover most of the common cattle questions and questions related to the dairy and the milk side of the farm. If you want to learn more, I'll be linking a bunch of videos in the top corner that go into more detail about all those different categories. But next, we're going to move on to the equipment side of things. A common question we get is, how many tractors do we have here on the farm?
So we got 8 tractors, and that evolved over 32 years of purchasing stuff. So we'll start from the smallest to the biggest. A Farmel M, a Farmel M Super MTA, which actually was one of my dad's tractors originally. A 1650 Gas Oliver, which you guys have been hearing a lot about. This 686, which I found out in the Dakotas years ago already. A 1066 International. A lot of you guys seem to love that one. That big red really seems to get a lot of attention. And then I switched over to John Deere. Don't ask me why. I think it was just one of them things where we just tried it one day and he said, hey, let's, this, I like this. So we got an open station 7405, which was called their Advantage Series, and that we bought back in, I believe, 99. That was my first new tractor, or almost new. It had just a handful of hours on it. And then the 7510, which is this one, and it's got the deluxe cab and the radial tires and all the bells and whistles on it originally. Purchased that back in 03. Then that 7810, which again, that's got the same cab on. It's just a bigger version of the 7510. Get them all?
Yeah, I think so. We got a lawnmower, a John Deere lawnmower.
We can really get down there. We got 2 different 4-wheelers you're using in the skid steers that were Bobcat,
Yeah, I got 2 skid steers. We got a video on that, so. Another common question would be, what are the main pieces of harvesting equipment for us for the dairy farm?
I guess I feel little square baler, and that's the way we grew up, and that's the way I started with a lot of stuff. And the facilities here with the hay loft and the convey system and stuff, and not having a lot of loader equipment when we started was kind of something that, and it's really interesting how those little square bales hold value, how that becomes. It doesn't matter how advanced the industry gets, that little square bale still seems to be the kind of the hottie of the hay or feed. It's kind of fits everybody.
Another common question related to that, how many square bales do you think we're making in a year?
Oh, it can vary a little bit, but I used to do like 13,000, and then we started chopping a lot more feed, of course, and that had to maybe do more with the weather, the climate change, and trying to make their hay dry. And then for dairying, you got to make quality, so if your hay gets more aged or mature, you kind of lose that. Yep. So like for beef cattle or dry cows and stuff, it may not matter as much. I mean, it's almost better to get it a little older, get more fiber. So yeah, the balers, the chopper, a Gale chopper, 1085. We were able to buy this from a neighbor that got out of dairying, and it's been very well cared for. Gale's been out of business a long time. I just love this machine. And we do have a 865 I bought brand new back in 01. It's just a lighter version of this. They're both beautiful machines to run, and they do a lot for us. We don't own a combine. We do hire a little bit of combine work for small grains like oats, and then in the fall we will, if we can't fit all our corn in the cribs, we'll have somebody come and shell. It's not really a lot. It's another machine that someone else can do a little maintaining on. I don't have to. But yeah, that's pretty much our main. And then we got that mounted corn picker. I know that's gotten a lot of attention.
To sum that up, main pieces of harvest equipment, we got the little square balers, we got the pole type choppers, and then we got the mounted corn pickers. So yeah, that would be the main.
That would be our main there.
So that's a brief overview on the equipment side of things. Mid-video here, I wanted to remind you guys to keep asking questions down in the comments so we can answer those in future videos. So now moving on to the crops and the acres questions, a really common one. How many acres is the farm made up of?
So the farm was originally 200 acres, and then purchasing land several times since then, we added to it 285 acres right now.
So just shy of 300. And then another common question, how much of it is cropland and how much of it is pasture?
So cropland, so we're probably about 100 to 105 acres of hay, and then roughly 45, 55 acres of corn. It'll vary from year to year. Maybe 6 to 12 acres of oats as a nurse crop to a new seeding. And then the balance is pasture and woods, which is, this farm is extremely hilly. This camera does not do these fields justice when it comes to how steep and hilly. We do get a lot of comments of why we don't do this or do that, and most of it revolves around the terrain that we're dealing with, that it's not something that can work out because of how crooked and steep things are.
So another common question is if we need to supplement by buying feed off the farm. Maybe a little, I guess, would be the answer to that.
So back in the early years, we did have to purchase some feed. The fertility was low and things like that. It took a while for it to get to the point where we could get some decent yields. Recently, we've been purchasing maybe a semi-load of Western hay once a year. That's a whole different type of feed for what we can produce here. And we don't add any proteins to our feed mix. You know, like our cob corn. We haven't been buying any corn. Years ago, I used to buy some corn before we ended up purchasing some land down here that's flatter for corn ground. So otherwise, I mean, we're kind of getting where, I suppose if we trim a little fat out of our cattle numbers, we would be fine.
Yeah, or maybe push more fertilizer versus buying hay. We would probably be able to just
It's kind of a fine line when you start, because of the, again, how steep the land is to how far do you want to push this. You know, right now we make just 3 crops of hay. I don't think I've ever done a 4th crop. I did try make some hay in October a couple different times, like some dry hay. We had some really nice weather, and it just is not. I guess if you really need it, you know, but if it make baleage or some kind of haylage or something, but typically we're 3 crops of hay. By the early September, we're wrapped up. I like to just be done with that. Maybe do some grazing, a lot of electric fencing to utilize some of these fields that are steeper. And
yeah, a lot of grazing. So that answers most of the common crop questions. So now let's move on to talking about the building site. Okay, now in the middle of the yard here, touch on the buildings. Common questions we get is how many buildings are in the yard here. So we have the main shop, which we were just in, the dairy barn where we started this morning. And then we have our 2 young stock buildings. We have our calf barn, we call it, and then our bull barn, heifer, dry cow barn over there.
Yeah, and the calf barn is up to maybe breeding size, just shy of breeding size. Yeah, and that's all pretty much heifers that are, and dry cows that are old enough to be bred and up from there. Yeah, and then we have our, you mentioned our super hut where we can house, there's 5 stalls in there where we're able to start some of our small calves out.
And then briefly to touch on the birds on the farm, which isn't necessarily a main enterprise or anything like that, just a little side hobby more than anything. So how many chickens do you think we have?
There probably is about 50 of them. That'll vary a little bit. It's more kind of, well, you started it. Yeah. We built the coop here years back when you were just in grade school yet. And then, of course, you handed that off to Mason. He ran it for a while, and now Owen is managing it. It's more about getting them feed and water. And when he's at school, I'll make sure I let him out in midday and stuff. But it's eggs for our own use. And then he has those ducks. So he's got 10 ducks.
Yeah, something like that.
They're some interesting creatures.
Yeah, they're pretty comical the way they wander around.
Anytime there's some water puddle someplace that, you know, especially over winter here when there's not a lot of that, they'll find that and they'll play in there.
So moving up here by our heifer barn here, we wanted to talk about the history briefly and how this farm came to be and how many generations of our family have been on this farm, because I think that's a pretty common question and maybe almost a misconception of how this farm came to be.
I'm gonna go back to how I grew up. So I've got 7 brothers and a sister. I'm the 3rd from the youngest. My sister's the oldest. I grew up 3 miles up the valley from here. My parents dairied pretty much similar to us as far as size. And my wife grew up in the same valley, basically on the other side of the valley. Again, a smaller dairy. Her dad was originally from Switzerland. He moved here in the 50s, worked for other farmers, and of course, eventually bought his own place and got married and had his family. And my wife has got 3 sisters and a brother, and she's also the third from the youngest, and her brother's the youngest. So it's kind of an interesting thing. We pretty much met on the school bus. Started dating when I was a senior in high school. So then we dated for about 7 years, looked at farms together. We both wanted the dairy. And that was the neatest thing about it. She was just as much into making a life in this industry as I was. Both being growing up in it made it so much easier for us to work together on it. I found this farm for sale. I bought this farm from a widow. And it's in the same valley. So basically where I grew up and where my wife grew up is basically 3 miles from this place. So this farm, there was no relation really. So we bought this farm in 91. And evolved it from there, and it was pretty primitive. I mean, really what sold this place to me was the dairy barn had a lot of potential. There wasn't a lot invested into this farm for quite a few years before we ended up getting it. It wasn't updated, I guess would be the best way to say it. But it had a lot of potential, and I had my doubts about all these hills and stuff. We grew up in hills. My wife did too, but this was a little more on the extreme side of that. But today it all kind of grows on you. Again, so we pretty much every year, every other year or so, we did do some updating to the point where we evolved up to now. So now we're 32 years into it. And of course now you kids, and so we're pretty much first generation here.
So to overview that, this wasn't originally in a Gierok farm. Mom and Dad were the first here. And then now I'd be second generation getting involved here on the farm. And I have 3 other siblings, a sister, and then my 2 brothers, which you see fairly often in the videos. I married to my wife, Darby, which you guys should have seen that if you follow the channel. Fairly similar story to Mom and Dad. Me and her dated for like 8 years, 9 years.
Since freshman high school,
wasn't
it?
Yep, since high school. Now, to kind of cover the economic side of farming, or the financial side of a small dairy like this. We get a lot of questions asking how can we support multiple families and incomes, like Mom and Dad and all the kids, along with myself and my wife and our future. How can a small farm like this support that? And the quick answer is there's a lot of incomes working off the farm. So like my mom, she's always kind of worked off the farm.
As a nurse, a registered nurse, pretty much since we came here, well, since '88. When she started working as a nurse, her perception was work 4 or 5 years, start having babies, and stay home, be a farm wife. Like that's the way it used to work out. But insurances and things, as we all know, it didn't make sense for her not to. So it's kind of like we're diversified. We got the dairy, we got the cattle, we got her job to income.
Yep. And then I have an off-the-farm job, and then so does my wife, and we both live off the farm. We have a house together off the farm. There's a lot of comments asking how's 40 cows support all that. Well, essentially it doesn't, but it is a nice side income for myself and my future family, along with growing into this and eventually transitioning away from the off the farm income.
So after raising you guys up, you're well into your mid-20s, and your brothers aren't too far behind you. I would have never realized what a dairy, especially a dairy farm, especially something ran like this, can do for raising children and just raising up adults. And there's so much dynamics with the cattle and the machinery, and every day everybody needs to help out. There's obviously never a shortage of things that need to be done. It's a great place to come back to, or to bring your kids to. As far as I'm concerned, there's no better place in the world to raise a family. Yeah. So really, that is probably the biggest value of this dairy. I never get up working all day thinking, what did I make today? It's more about do we have all the bills paid, and that's really all we need to know for sure. And the rest is more of a value of family.
So that covers that question of how this farm came to be and how it can sustain multiple families. And then rolling into the build part of it, a common question we get is what's the current milk price? And then I also wanted to throw in there what we think a good milk price is, a sustainable milk price is.
It just seems like when people ask you that aren't in the dairy industry, what's the milk price? Really, what's the expense versus the milk price? When we started out here, milk price was $8, $9, and it paid for everything, that as long as you just did things within your means. We didn't spend money we didn't have because it wasn't coming in that quick. But equipment and everything goes with trying to run a business like this was so much cheaper. Fuel was under $1, for instance. I mean, land prices were a fraction of what they are now. Our milk price right now it's been flopping all over the place between $15 and $18, and a lot of it comes down to the components in the milk. Cheese yield, for instance. How much cheese can they make out of 100 pounds of milk and those type of things. So it revolves a lot around that, not just so much a hundredweight. And an optimum milk price, I believe, should be $30 a hundredweight. But what bothers me is as soon as the milk price starts to look really good, it seems like the industry gets greedy and floods the market. I think if everyone would say, this is great, let's stay at this level, let's not grow. And, but that's not the way it works.
Yeah, that's the beauty and the bad side of American agriculture is we're really good at producing and we can flood a market.
I think it's addicting. I think farmers are addicted to do more, and the equipment and the technology allows us to have less people. I mean, the dairy industry, we just had our milk meeting, and I want to think we're 0.5%, maybe 1/4%. And that was actually including all the employees that come with these dairy farms too, not just owners of dairy farms. So the farmers altogether are less than 2% of the population feeding the whole world. That's, to me, that's some wild numbers.
And I think that's a pretty good place to end it, saying that we're less than 2% of the population feeding the world. So if you guys have any more comments and questions that we didn't cover, make sure to let us know that down below. We'll try to continue to share this lifestyle with you guys and answer and educate you guys along the way, and also learn from you too. So thank you all for being part of this. Thank you all for leaving questions and comments down below, sharing, liking, and watching the videos. Make sure to check out the other videos, and we will see you guys next time.